Hi, everybody. Good Monday afternoon. Let me bring you up to date what's going on in the tropics that we've been talking about on Fox Weather here this afternoon. So, this system is not really a system yet out in the Atlantic. We'll talk more about the details of that in just a moment. But it's really our interest is really based on what the European computer forecast model has been predicting and has been predicting consistently. And that is that in the next few days, the possibility of a system developing somewhere in this area is real. So we don't have a system yet, but we are seeing these indications, these consistent indications in the computer model. So the National Hurricane Center has a 0% chance in the next 2 days, and then a 50% chance after that of this thing actually becoming at least a tropical depression. It looks most likely that that would happen somewhere in the Bahamas or near Florida. In terms of it finally having the opportunity to begin to develop. That means we are not likely to have a strong storm in South Florida or in the Bahamas, for example, but the water is very, very warm, so we don't rule out anything here as we head toward August, when obviously we're heading toward the peak of the hurricane season. So let's talk about the details of this. First of all, this is what we're talking about. Well, there's two parts to it. One is down here and another is up in here. And you see there are hardly even thunderstorms out there. The conditions are so hostile to any kind of development, but there's a lot of energy in this system here, and that's what the computer forecasts are picking up on. Also, I want you to notice this front here that's draped down into South Florida now, causing some extra thunderstorm activity this afternoon in South Florida, as a matter of fact. Well, that's generally low pressure there in the mid levels of the atmosphere. And so that's pushed the high pressure offshore, and the high pressure is what does the steering here. So that means that the flow is going to turn north somewhere in here. Now, where is it exactly going to turn north? That's the question. So there's high confidence that whatever form all this takes, it's going to kind of want to turn north at some point. But is it going to be before or after it gets to Florida? That's an open question. Yes, it could be well offshore. Yes, it could be very close to or over the state. And yes, it could be into the Gulf of Mexico. But because that front is there, it's pushed the high over, and that has changed the steering complexion. All right, so let's take a look at these two parts to this, two ingredients. One is this one down here, and the other is this kind of larger system that really is more just energy. It's a tropical disturbance, but without any thunderstorms, because there's all the Saharan dust out there, which has dried out that part of the atmosphere. You can see this one is just below the Saharan dust, so it is retaining more of its moisture. But this one is very embedded, so anything that tries to develop just gets dried out like a sponge on top of the thunderstorms, and it can't develop. Well, here's what the computer forecasts indicate, and there's consensus about this. Every computer forecast essentially says that this is going to happen, that this dominant one here, this big one, is going to absorb the moisture from that one. So here we go into the future. There's tomorrow. Now we're at Friday or Wednesday. Here we are Wednesday, and the system is somewhere over the northeastern Caribbean islands, and the moisture is trying to consolidate. Now, we're not expecting this could be any kind of developed system, but still gusty winds, because there is energy in this thing, gusty winds and downpours and so forth. And it's going to be kind of a big system, we think. So it's going to take a while to get through the islands there. So if you're in Puerto Rico or the surrounding islands, just bear that in mind. Now, let's go forward in time, and it moves somewhere to the west-northwest. If it were to start down here somewhere, that movement could be over these mountains, and that would pretty much be the end of it, or it would tear it apart, and it certainly would delay any kind of potential development. But if it's up here and it moves into the Bahamas about Friday in some location near that, and it starts wrapping up in some fashion moisture here, now we're over very, very warm water. The forecasts are for the upper level winds to become more conducive about Friday into Saturday. So now we're going to have to watch it closely. Obviously, it's not far offshore of Miami, and exactly where it goes is an open question after that point. Looking ahead and looking at the various computer forecasts, the European model insists it's going to go up here or up here, very close to Florida, perhaps, and other models insist that it's going to go into the Gulf of Mexico as a weak system. Now, none of them have a strong system here on Friday, but some do begin the strengthening process through Friday and Saturday as it moves to the north. So this is all a very open question, and we absolutely have to remember that any storms that are not developed, the forecasts are likely to change because we don't have anything to actually peg on and know where the center is, exactly what the circulation is like, and so forth. This is a big amorphous blob of actually two systems at the current time. Now, the European model says that the system is going to be, as I said, offshore here somewhere, but notice some of the possibilities are very close to Miami, Southeast Florida, the Palm Beaches. Some are well offshore. There's just no way to know, and there's no way to know that the European model is right, by the way. It's not always right. It in general has the weather pattern better than where the highs and lows are in the middle part of the atmosphere. Generally has them better than the other models, but not that much better. And in terms of storm tracks for an undeveloped system, things could completely change tonight, tomorrow, the next couple of days. We have a ways to go here. So when we look at the factors here that are for development, in favor of development, in other words, what do we have? Well, we have, first of all, extremely warm ocean waters. Record warm waters down there in the Caribbean and in the Atlantic near Puerto Rico. That's why it's been so hot in the Caribbean islands this summer. So that's going to give it extra fuel that can help it consolidate and actually moisten up. The upper level winds are forecast to be reasonably conducive when it gets over the Bahamas and near Florida. And there is that just very consistent model support from the European model. And when we see that, that gives us a little more confidence, but we have lower confidence because this thing hasn't even developed. Now, when we look at the factors that are against development, one is, of course, the mountainous terrain. If it develops so that it tracks over those mountains, it's just not going to be able to do much. The Saharan dust is a lot of Saharan dust, and getting rid of that, mixing that out, moistening up the system, which is required if it's going to develop into anything, that can take time. And the large size of that ingredient number 2 system also will take time to consolidate. So these last two really are an indication that nothing is going to happen very quickly. So that's why we say this is just going to take some days here before we get a better handle on exactly what's going on. In addition, in the Pacific, we're seeing development right now. So what that tells us is that the air is rising in the Pacific, because you have to have rising air to get thunderstorms to develop. There are 3 systems out there. The hurricane center is watching right now. And when it's rising in the Pacific, it's often descending to some degree in the Atlantic, and that can be inhibiting to development a little bit. So that's, again, another negative factor, but that can be counteracted by the extremely warm water temperatures, because that makes air rise, right? When you heat with the water, that heats the air, and the air rises. So there are competing factors. The bottom line is that all these things are just clues at this point, because you have this tremendous uncertainty of exactly even where the system is going to develop in the first place, which is not going to happen here for a few days. So that's what we've been talking about on Fox Weather this afternoon. Wanted to bring you up to date. And of course, we'll continue to cover it all week long, looks like, and into the weekend, and have the latest for you here and on foxweather.com, or on your app on your phone. If you download the Fox Weather app, you can actually watch us live. Have a good day.